Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, Adobe blows it. A treasure trove of customer information and source code is found on attackers' servers. We'll give you the details. The DNS hijacking hijinks continue after several major sites are brought offline, and then it's a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 131 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on October 10th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as the show goes on. And our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. Go take a look at that. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. I'm just kind of reviewing the notes here before we get started, and I thought, I'll be honest, I thought 131, this is going to be the episode, is going to be a small show, and we kind of make like a little gimmick out of it and be like, it's just roundup and feedback this week, because we have plenty in those segments just to make a whole... Yeah. I mean, there's more in those segments than some podcasts have in their whole show, right?
Yeah, and then we're like, well, there's these two big stories that we just have to cover.
Yeah.
And then we wrote down, and like, we could have done like no roundup and no feedback and still had a long show.
So now we have a big show. And you have been working your butt off on a BSD patch, right? So how's that going? I mean, I don't want to steal from BSD now, but I'm kind of curious.
It's mostly, it's about half committed now. It's a little complicated because, we're in code freeze and feature freeze. So getting it committed is a bit more work. But Devin Teskey is working very hard with the release engineers to get all of our patches in. And then FreeBSD 10 will support installing with an only ZFS file system, which it currently wasn't able to support until I was on the plane to EuroBSDCon. I was like, well, nobody else seems to want to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'm like, I'll just make this really horrible hackish implementation that'll just get it started. Right? So at least there'll be some way to do it, and then we can make it pretty after. And then that afternoon in the hotel, once I recharged the battery of my laptop, because I plugged my laptop into the outlet in the airplane.
Yeah, and it wasn't working, it wasn't functional?
The light on the outlet was on, but I don't know if it just wasn't enough power or what, but my laptop didn't charge.
Oh, no.
So unbeknownst to me, when I got to the airport in Frankfurt and had a two-hour layover where I thought I would hack on the computer some more, the battery was already flat. So anyway, once I got to the hotel and checked in and sat down in this little lounge area they had and found an outlet and got some power.
Kept working?
Then I emailed a copy of my diff off to Devin Teskey, who had reviewed some of the stuff I had talked about before. And, I didn't really think about it after that. It was, I went out for dinner with BSD people and went to bed.
You're doing the
conference. And when I woke up, I got an email, and it was like, I saw you made this patch, and I saw that you said it was kind of ugly. And so here, I made it pretty. And I looked at it, I'm like, holy shit.
Now I want to work on it more.
Back and forth, and all of a sudden now it supports disk encryption, and it's all this beautiful menu, and then we solve some other outstanding problems with the installer. Like the very first question it asks you is if you have a strange keyboard, and it defaults to yes. So I was like, I'm just going to change that default to no.
Yeah.
And then when the feedback I got on that was Warren Block, one of the other FreeBSD guys, was like, well, I had this patch that would offer you an option to actually test the key map to see if it's working, right? So after you pick from this huge list of different types of keyboards, give you a text box to type in to see if, when you press the letter D, if it actually prints the letter D instead of P or something, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I made this hack, and then Devin Teskey rewrote it all again, and now it's this beautiful one menu. So instead of like 2 or 3 dialogues going through, it's just one big one, and it's got the test system built into it.
Well, what strikes me is, this is like, there's some things you can work on that maybe only a handful of people will use, but this is the kind of thing that I think a lot of people are going to use. Installing ZFS from the installer, that's right. Got to be...
For a couple of months now, I've been maintaining this wiki document on how to do it. And it's like 19 steps that you have to type at the shell and it's just a lot of typing. And, when you're at the shell before the install, you're generally not able to copy and paste.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And, I'm not a programmer. I can't write C. So, you would think, well, I guess I couldn't really be a FreeBSD developer. But,
there's spots where shell does the job.
Most of this install is in shell script, and the parts of it that aren't, Devin Teskey kind of wants to change.
There's serious advantages to it. It sounds funny at first, but there's real advantages.
The biggest one being that pretty much any sysadmin can sit down and read it and figure out what's going on and maybe even make a patch.
Yep.
And
or even just modify their own for their purposes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's... And if FreeBSD is going to become even bigger with, I call it large-scale virtualization, but other people call it the cloud.
Right. I like your term better.
Yes. That, being able to script all this stuff and just have, be able to quickly whip up your magic version of it is very important. And so getting rid of the fact that all the partition editing was in C will be a big advantage, I think.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, good work. And I'll check in with you. Are you going to talk about it on BSD now, too? Or is this kind of... Good?
Yeah. But basically, nothing was finalized yet yesterday. But today, a chunk of the patches have actually been submitted, and the rest are pending.
Gosh, that's cool.
So, yes, that will be all kinds of craziness. And I very much look forward to seeing Devin Teskey in a couple of weeks at the VBSDCon.
Right, yeah.
We'll talk more about that in the feedback section.
Very good, very good. Well, why don't we start with a huge story? Speaking of craziness, I think it was just a little bit after we got off the air, maybe a day or so last week, it came out that Adobe has suffered a pretty massive breach, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so what's going on?
So Adobe servers were compromised sometime between July 31st and August 15th, but the attack was not discovered until September 15th. What actually happened was some security researchers, including Brian Krebs and the guy's last name is Holden. I forget his first name.
I'm scanning right now. Oh, Alexis Holden, the Cisco of Holden Security LLC. Yeah. A CISO, I'm sorry, a CISO of Holden Security.
They found a server, a compromised server that had all this data laying on it. And when they looked into the data, it was a giant stolen database from Adobe.
So they weren't out actively looking for this. They just came across this.
Well, they were just doing the regular security research and fighting compromised servers and stuff.
Yeah.
And they happened to find the bad guy's stash of stolen data.
What an incredible find.
It includes the source code for numerous Adobe products, including Adobe Acrobat, Publisher, Cold Fusion, and Cold Fusion Builder. Those are especially bad. Cold Fusion is this web framework thing, and a zero-day exploit in Cold Fusion was what compromised Linode a couple of months ago.
Right.
Which is a popular VPS provider. And as always, the source code leaks like this would allow the attacker to go through the code and more easily generate a whole bunch of different zero-day attacks against these Adobe products, right? As if we don't have enough attacks against Adobe Acrobat. Now somebody has the source code so they can find all the ones that they hadn't found before.
This was my first thought, is like, talk about, here I'm Mr. Open Source, but the open source products are developed in the open under the understanding that anybody can audit this, but sometimes, companies like Adobe or Oracle with Java, they rely on that security through obscurity, and they, now that this is out there, I mean, people can just riff right through it. And who knows how many copies there are.
I'm not sure how many people are going to have it.
Yeah,
which is even worse.
There's no way to know.
If this was just posted publicly, then others, like white hat security researchers, could go through, find the bugs, and get them patched before people exploit them.
True.
But if the bad guys just sit on this code, then only they will have these 0 days.
And they get to sell it.
Or use them. Mm-hmm. To compromise other big companies that use Acrobat or whatever.
Which is every big company.
And yes, the biggest thing is that these 0 day exploits, there's no defense against them because that's what the 0 day means. It means you have 0 days of warning between before the attack starts.
This is going to be... I don't know. It's hard to gauge how the impact that's going to be, but it seems like if this is the only copy, then that group maybe, but you just no way to know how. I mean, who wouldn't make multiple copies of something like this?
Well, they have. I'm sure they have copies, but just how many people they will decide to share it with.
Yeah.
Also, sensitive information about people with Adobe.com accounts was also taken, including the names, encrypted credit card numbers, expiration date, order history, and so on for 2.9 million Adobe customers, especially people that have that Adobe Creative Cloud suite.
So this is
the new version of Photoshop where you have to pay a monthly fee or something instead of buying it.
They've been pushing everybody this direction. This is the new product direction. And then,
put everything in the cloud.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, all your data was stolen.
Yeah. Awesome. This is and this kind of thing, by the way, isn't going to be unique to Adobe.
Exactly. Adobe's chief security officer, Brad Arkin, said, at this time, we do not believe the attackers removed decrypted credit card or debit card numbers from our system. Interesting that they have decrypted credit card numbers on their system somewhere.
That does sort of imply that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And they didn't say what type of encryption it was, of course.
Right, exactly. And or also if passwords are hashed or whatever. They've made everybody reset their password, but we'll see. Because the type of people that have Adobe accounts, like especially Creative Cloud, like artistic people, are more likely than regular tech users to have the same password on their Adobe.com account as they have on their email account. And so if you can brute force the passwords of all these Adobe users, and then, if some part of the user data is their email address, then you just to try that password against that email address, and then, bazinga, you have how many stolen email accounts, and then you can reset all their other, oh, look, this person has Twitter, I can steal that. Or,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, look, online banking, fun times.
Yeah.
Also, Krebs found a list of 1.2 million .org domains that run Cold Fusion, some data that Adobe had collected, all of which could be a target if these guys managed to make an exploit for Cold Fusion. There's also been a rumor going around that it was actually an exploit against Cold Fusion that allowed the attackers to compromise Adobe.
Oh, interesting.
Adobe made a tweet saying that it wasn't that, and then they deleted the tweet. And they say the investigation is still ongoing, and they're not sure whether they can't rule out if it was Cold Fusion yet.
So far, they say their investigation has not turned up any zero-day attacks, but that's
right.
So far.
So that's 0 days used against them, not ones that will be generated based on the stolen source code.
Right. Yeah, and boy, oh man.
Anonymous in the chat room says he wonders if serial numbers for Adobe products were also downloaded. That's not how serial numbers work. There's an algorithm that decides whether each number is valid or not, so there won't be just some master list of what the valid tokens are at Adobe. You would just get the code that decides, and then you can make what's called a key generator, where you just generate random numbers until you find one that matches the algorithm to be valid.
So do we know who did this? Like, did they... Okay. So they just found a dump somewhere, and they don't know who did it.
Basically. Holden and Krebs discovered a 40-gigabyte file full of stolen data on the same server hosting stolen data from the LexisNexis, Dun & Bradstreet, and Kroll. A bunch of other companies were also compromised. It may be interesting to see if there was a commonality in the attack vector on all four targets.
Right. Maybe the same group there.
Yep. Threat Post also has a post saying that additional companies were also compromised, but the names haven't been released yet. So there was other data also on that server from other companies that the researchers are still getting in contact with to let them know they were compromised before it's on the news. Right?
Man, they really found a treasure trove.
Yep. And they have I have some additional coverage here from Threat Post and ZDNet. And Adobe has, for some reason, 3 separate posts about it on their own site.
I hope they're sweating bullets right now.
Yep.
It's just so this is something I've kind of been complaining about recently. Is I feel like as consumers of these services, and I've given thought to using the Creative Cloud because it's like I don't want to pay the full price for Adobe Photoshop, but every now and then it's like there's something we do here, or we're working with somebody to make like a frame.
Also,
around
just it would maybe give you the ability to run it on whatever computer you needed on that minute.
Yeah.
Instead of normally, like you install Photoshop on one
and it
computer,
takes forever
and then you have
too,
to go and and you have to go and use that computer if you want Photoshop.
Yeah.
Whereas with the idea with the cloud is like, I need it on this computer, and then tomorrow I need it over here, and whatever.
The the problem I have with all of these services is, as a consumer, I have a vague intuition as to what kind of data they store about me. I kind of know just by what I provide them, but I don't know for sure what they actually keep. And then what they do keep, I have zero idea how they keep it. And this is becoming like this problem that is, because so many sites and services now have this information, it is the risk is multiplied greater and greater and greater.
And that's what I think, kind of moving towards something we're trying to do in Canada is along the lines of, if there's a breach like this, then there's a fine to the company that was attacked. And to prompt them to shore up the walls instead of just being like, oh, we're sorry all your credit cards were stolen.
I wonder if anything like that would... I don't think anything like that would happen in the U.S. Because they'd say, well, we've already had such a financial loss from the breach.
Also at the, the stolen credit cards themselves aren't that big of a deal, right? You usually have zero liability from your Visa or whatever and so on. But when it's identity theft, that's a little more. And that's why in the States, I think it's about a third of all states now require that if the user that is affected is from like Massachusetts, then the company has to provide them with credit monitoring for a year.
Right. Well,
I remember Sony. It was funny. We were tearing apart the Sony announcement, and they only offered it in the three states that it was required back then a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Instead of just doing it for everybody, whereas a couple companies have just done it for everybody.
Yeah.
Possibly just because it was easier for them to just give it to everybody than it was to figure out who needed it, who they were legally obligated to give it to, and who they weren't.
That's a lot better PR too.
Yes, exactly. It's like we don't have to give this to you, but we are because we're sorry that we.
I guess at the end of the day, at least Adobe makes horribly buggy products, is responsible for Flash, doesn't properly support Linux or FreeBSD, and now has caused this massive data leak. Is responsible for this massive data leak. So, at the end of the day, at least we have that.
Something like that.
Do you have any other thoughts on this one?
No, that's what it.
Okay. I don't mean to rant too much, but Adobe is so disappointing on so many levels. Can I tell you about something that isn't disappointing?
They're not Oracle.
I guess they got that going for them. You're right. They're not Oracle. Now, just wait till this happens to Oracle. Then we're really going to have something.
Yeah.
This is almost as bad, though. I mean, really, Acrobat Reader and Acrobat, especially in enterprises, is almost just, or it's got to be just as widely deployed almost as Java, right? I mean, it is PDF, the PDF format and the tools to create PDFs. I've never had a client that didn't have it. I mean, never, ever. It's always in business.
I've never.
Well, yeah, like us. We know how to generate PDFs without buying their crap, but.
Well, generating is actually the more difficult thing.
Yeah.
Well, now it's not so bad now. I just use like OpenOffice or I've
Chrome will do it.
That lets me. It makes a fake printer.
QPDF is great for Windows. Yep. That's so I'd always kind of steer people that way, but the enterprise deployment is huge.
Oftentimes I get a PDF and I would like to edit it.
Yeah.
And that is more difficult.
Yes. Can GIMP do that? I want to say GIMP can do that. I don't know, though. I haven't tried it.
Although I found that sometimes when you do that, it turns the whole thing into a raster. So all of a sudden you edit the 100 kilobyte PDF of text, and now it's a 4 megabyte PDF of pictures of text.
Yeah. That does happen.
Because mine was trying to speed up the turnaround of signing crap.
Yeah.
I was like, rather than print this chicken scratch on it and then scan it and send it, it's like I have a digitalized version of my signature. I just want to stamp it on there. And then also, even if I'm going to sign it manually, I want to type the date and my name and all the other information.
So that way they can read it.
Than, I have really, really poor handwriting.
Me too, yeah.
I type. The last time I printed anything with,
I actually just recently started writing again to take notes. That's how I'm taking my notes now. But it's my chicken scratch. Only I can read it. It's worse than cursive.
I can't read it, so I don't do it. And it hurts my hands.
Yeah, it does do that too. Yeah.
Because I'm just not used to holding a pen anymore.
I squeeze the pen too hard.
Me too. But anyway, it's crazy.
Can I tell you about something else I squeezed too hard? Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's right. GoDaddy.com is sponsoring this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. I'm a huge fan of GoDaddy. There's a lot of reasons that I've worked with GoDaddy for a long time before they were even a sponsor of any of our shows. But now They have been such a long-time, fantastic supporter of not just the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, which has been incredible, but also of the TechSNAP program. And right now we have one of the best deals in the history of their support of our network, and that is the $1.99.com. When you're over at GoDaddy.com, you can either, before you go, you can just click the banner in our show notes. That'll pre-charge your shopping session. But instead, if maybe you're wily and you just go over there on your own because you know you're a self-starter, just be sure to use the code TECH199 when you're checking out. That'll get you a .com for $1.99. Now, additional .coms, $9.99, or additional years on that $1.99.com, $9.99. It's a great deal. There's tons of awesome tools over at GoDaddy. I have currently in my hot little hands 3 of their Linux-based web servers that I can just use to toss stuff up on, bounce things around, all these kinds of things, and I have probably held on to those things. Gosh, you know what I did before we were on Scale Engine is I used them. I had a little PHP script that would distribute the downloads off of those. So instead of having everything pull from one server, I would have 3 GoDaddy servers, and I would have this little script that you guys would hit that you didn't know you were hitting that would then send your request off to a different GoDaddy server. Now, I have transitioned from that to using those as more development and test servers, but they're still fantastic, and the value is incredible. So while the GoDaddy has .coms, they have tons of other services, ways to improve your website, ways to mobilize it. Go over there, use the code TECH199 to get a .com for $1.99. That's going to get you started. Use that .com for the holidays. Use that .com for a business card. Use it to shorten your Google Plus URL because Google doesn't know how URLs work, apparently.
What's with that?
I don't know, man. I don't know. They're ridiculous. You know what I bought?
Even Facebook. Remember how long it took for Facebook to finally release usernames?
Yeah.
And then when they did, there was this land rush to get them.
Well, and they had to do it because Twitter was doing it. You know what I bought last night, although I haven't pointed at anything because I totally forgot about it until just now? I bought I bought the domain jbtitles.com. So instead of telling people...
Ah, yes.
Right? Why
didn't we think of that?
I don't know.
Last time it was $1.99.
I don't know. So, it's like little things like that where we used to have this super long URL that now I'm just going to be able to tell people at the end of the show, go to jbtitles.com to vote. It makes things easier. It sticks in your brain. It's easier to help people remember if you're working with friends, colleagues, clients. Give them a .com. $1.99.
There's no excuse not to do it.
I know. It's almost a tragedy if you don't. So go over to GoDaddy.com and use the code TECH199 when you check out. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Longtime sponsors of the show.
Yes.
Appreciate that a lot.
I still can't get over the awesomeness of the delegation stuff, like being able to have multiple people manage domains.
I know. It really is all about that, especially in our world. It is really all about that.
If you don't do that, there's this thing called the bus factor. What happens if the only person, it's a big company, what happens if the only person that has the login for all the domain names gets hit by a bus?
Yep.
Nobody controls all your domain names now.
That's why Alan and I do this show from 2 different countries because we are very cognizant of the bus factor.
High availability bus factor.
Okay. So, we were like, okay, Adobe got hacked. That's kind of a big deal. But that's only one well, it's going to be more than, we'll find out it's more than one company. But right now, we're only talking about one company. Now, this next story, if I'm correct, is a DNS hijacking story that impacted multiple companies, right?
Yes.
So what's going on here?
So Network Solutions, which is one of the an alternative to GoDaddy that is more expensive and not as good, is investigating an attack by a pro-Palestinian hacking group that hijacked the DNS of WhatsApp, AVG, Avira, Alexa, and a bunch of other sites.
Oh, Alexa, huh?
Yep. So the group calls itself KDMS, and they claim responsibility for the attack on Twitter. They posted several screenshots on Twitter, including one showing the affected WhatsApp domain. So WhatsApp's DNS, their website was pointed at some other web server rather than their web server. The message asserted that the region known as Palestine had been stolen and that prisoners should be released from Israeli jails and so on and so on.
It was essentially, so these guys were trying to raise awareness about the Palestine situation.
Right.
In fact, one of the...
They were taking domain names instead of people hostage.
Yeah, and one of the domains they took hostage, they actually put a map up on the domain of, here's Palestine, 20 years ago. Here it is 10 years ago. Here it is now. And, obviously just trying to spread information about what they feel has been an injustice.
Sure. But the websites affected included AVG and Avira, which are both antivirus companies. They could have possibly put up, Trojan versions of the antivirus software there if they wanted to.
Yeah.
The messaging app platform WhatsApp, with that, they might have been able to intercept people's messages in some ways. They also took out the pornographic website RedTube. And the web
No.
metrics company Alexa, which is one of the sites that, I don't know that it works as well as it used to, but back in
No.
the day, Alexa was built into Internet Explorer and reported usage on all websites back to Alexa.
Right.
Now, I don't know how. I think their metrics are only based on people using the Alexa toolbar, so their metrics are useless.
It's kind of a joke now, yeah.
Yeah. But on the Network Solution blogs, it says, it appears that our... Oh, sorry, is this on... I think WhatsApp's blog, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. On WhatsApp's blog, it appears that our account used to manage DNS records at our registrar, Network Solutions, has received a fake password reset request that was actually honored by the provider. So it seems this was actually a social engineering attack against Network Solutions, where someone claimed to be from WhatsApp and got the password for the DNS account reset. So then the attacker just logged in and changed the DNS.
Pretty simple, really.
It's like, how does Network Solutions not have a proper password reset system that's secure? As in, have to send an email to here and,
Yeah,
two-factor authentication. Like,
that's
these
what I
are
was gonna
big
say is,
companies.
let's
They need
two-factor this
two-factor
thing, yeah.
and like a phone call.
Yeah.
And stuff, right?
What do you think about this trend? I mean, it's been a trend for a while now, but what do you think about this trend where the new I don't want to call it civil disobedience, but this new before maybe you'd spray paint the side of a building or something like that, a billboard. Now it's you deface several websites at once, and it seems to be having the intended
I think
effect.
this one's a little more along the lines of 1980s taking people hostage type thing. But
Do you feel like this is different than what we're seeing from the Syrian Electronic Army? Because to me, it kind of smacks of the same stuff.
No, it's the same thing. Although, yeah, basically, yeah, it's the same thing.
I just find this interesting
And,
because it
I-
seems like
yes. I think it was, I forget which security company said that since 2011, more breaches have been credited to hacktivists than cyber criminals.
right. Well,
Yeah,
and
like these guys weren't out to hijack the traffic from AVG and install viruses on people's computers. They were out to spread a message.
so this has been the interesting thing. We've covered a couple of times where major profile sites or companies have been hacked, their websites have been replaced, where the attacker could have put malicious code on there.
Right, where
didn't.
they could have been stealthy and actually exploited people's computers and made a huge mess.
Yeah.
But instead, they just went for the shock and awe factor.
But
of
I would say
getting a message out there.
the coverage of this stuff hasn't diminished. Like sometimes the tech press just gets tired of the same story and they just kind of stop paying attention. That is not the case here at all. These continue to
Well,
get
these
high
are-
profile coverage.
Yeah, they need to because companies need. We talked about this from the what was it, the CTO or CIO of the NSA, the former one, saying the security is abysmal, and obviously it is.
I agree,
Network
yeah.
Solutions tries to bill itself as the registrar for the big websites because only little kids use GoDaddy. It's like, yeah, but GoDaddy wouldn't have gave out your password.
Oh, please don't even get me started on network solutions. I've had and
Yeah.
I'll but here's my point. And my point is, and I'm not saying this is right, but as long as they continue to get this kind of coverage, it's massive incentive to keep doing this, right? Because it's exactly the result they want.
Yes, but hopefully the coverage is incentive for the companies to lock their shit down.
I know it, yeah. And also you need to tell people this keeps happening so it's a problem. So we as consumers know to ask for two-factor authentication and things like that. I mean, it's like this catch-22 in a way.
Yep. But in general, I think we should. It's not good that people go around defacing websites, but at the same time, I'd rather that it was defaced rather than having
Oh, for
malware
sure.
injected, right?
But if we take that to its logical extension, well, why do you stop there? Why not install malware on people's PCs that constantly pops up messages about Palestine, right? Or continually broadcast them anti-Israel propaganda?
Right. Well,
why not go that far?
I'm not agreeing with defacing websites. I'm just saying.
Oh, no,
that
I know you're not, but I'm
not
saying
agreeing with
in their
suppressing news
logic, it
coverage.
seems like it's not going to stop here. Like this is
Right.
what they're doing now, but then they're going to have to take it a step further, and that's probably where they will start distributing malware.
I think that the difference is that if you install something on my desktop that popped up, I wouldn't be inclined to listen to your message, right? Because then you'd be inconveniencing me. Whereas when it's just, I heard on the news about this.
Yeah. I mean, those
But
WhatsApp
I don't
users
think
were
that
inconvenienced.
I don't think defacing a website has ever changed anyone's mind about a topic either. So
Yeah. I guess, yeah. I don't get it.
yeah.
Marky says I should stop giving them ideas in the chat room. He's probably right. You know, the TechSNAP program's live on Thursdays if you'd like to join us at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is...
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Yeah. You just
You
join us
can
over...
join, you go to jblive.tv, and below the video, there's actually a web chat as well.
Yeah, and we also, Alan has provided right there links to the RTSP links and HLS. And HLS works on your mobile device, and RTSP will work in like VLC and other desktop video players that play that. So you can always watch along, or you can stream it over jblive.info if you want the audio edition, which is nice when you're working, jogging, driving, things like that. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story? No?
Oh, no. Sorry.
DNS hijacking, Adobe code leaking. It's time for some good news. Are you ready for some good news, Alan?
Yep.
I'd like to thank our next sponsor and final sponsor for this week's show, Ting.com. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Ting is mobile that makes sense, my mobile service provider. And I have to tell you, one of the things I love about Ting is it is a relationship made in heaven, because I don't like termination fees. Ting don't got them. I don't like contracts. Ting don't got them. That's right. No contracts, no early termination, no bundling of ride-along services you don't expect. Plus, they include things like hotspot and tethering, which is fantastic. And Ting has a lot of little things about them that I like a lot, too. First of all, a great range of devices. You buy any of these devices, they're all going to be contract-free. I think that's really pretty fantastic, because then you truly own that device. They have a whole range you can choose from. I have a little jealousy. I have a little jealousy because my buddy Michael Dominic on Coda Radio picked up the Moto X recently, and Ting has the Moto X as well as the Galaxy S4. Those are some of my favorite. The HTC One is looking great. Now, when you go over to techsnap.ting.com, you can take $25 off any of these devices. If you bring your own device, they'll take $25 off your first month of service. Now, the average Ting bill, is $21 a month. So if you figure your first month, $25, that's almost probably, you probably will get your first month free, maybe if we're just in that range. The way it works is Ting just charges you for what you use. They break your minutes, your text messages, and your megabytes all up at the end of the month, or whatever bucket you fall into. That's what you end up paying. It's really straightforward. It's very easy to understand. And the best part about it is they have an always up-to-date, accurate dashboard. I love the Ting dashboard. It's nobody else in the business has a cell phone dashboard like this. It is so awesome. You can go in there, you can set alerts, you can activate devices, you can remove devices, you can suspend devices, you can resume devices, you can give devices nicknames, you can set alerts for one phone but not the other phone. It's a really powerful way to get anything you need done. But, you know, sometimes, even though they have all the tools you need to solve the problem for yourself, you want to talk to somebody. Well, guess what? Ting does that right, too. If you call them at 1-855-846-4389 between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., a real person answers the phone. And actually, I believe they're Canadian.
It's a real live Canadian.
Yeah. So here's another great example. One of the things I love about Ting is they have an active blog where they communicate with their customers, and they have a video up right now of one of their service reps, or actually, she's now an intern in the marketing department, but she used to be a service representative. She talks about that, and she talks about how they take calls there, and you get to see a little bit of the Ting offices too. Ting also has frequent hangouts and other things they post up on their blog, so it's always worth checking it out. You can go to ting.com/blog for that. But really, where you need to start, techsnap.ting.com. That's going to get you $25 off that first device. If you got an Evo or something like that, that's what I did. I brought my Evo 4G. Ting has a list of the devices you can bring. They also have a used device concierge service where you can go say, hey, could you find me a device that's kind of compatible with this? Oh, sure, we can do that. And they'll actually go out and find it for you and then contact you once they have it. Now, if that isn't enough, one last thing I want to let you know about. Ting also has an early termination relief program. Up to $75 per line. All you have to do is buy your Ting device, port your number over, and then submit your ETF claim, and Ting will give you up to $75 to relieve that termination fee. Now, let me tell you, you take that in there, you go over to the Ting calculator and see how much you're going to save. You're going to be blown away. The sooner you get started, the more you will save. And with the holidays coming up, now is a better time than ever, especially with their shared family plans. If you've got a small business or you have a family, multiple people, or if you're like me, you just have multiple phones for some reason I can't even explain it myself. It's only $6 per line. They all share one pooled set of minutes. That's great for a small team, a medium-sized team, or a family, or even just an individual. So go to techsnap.ting.com. Techsnap.ting.com. Don't give that Linux Action Show the credit because TechSNAP deserves it. And thanks to
Yes.
Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Love Ting, love their service, and I love my HTC One too. I really think, Alan, that if they ever get up in your neck of the woods, you're going to have to jump on it.
Oh, yes.
I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, I will.
Thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
And hopefully it's relatively soon because I'm kind of getting tired of my phone.
I was like, I want a new device. I'm trying to hold out for Ting.
My current ones will expire eventually, and yeah.
Yeah. All right, Alan. Well, with the news done, we have a huge feedback section to get through, and then we have a massive roundup. So let's kick off right now. We'll say goodbye to the news and prepare ourselves because it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, our first email this week comes in from Dave, and he's got a FreeNAS question. You ready for this one?
Yep.
Here we go. It says, hey guys, love the show, longtime listener. He's in awe of your techie skills with a Z. And my broadcasting genius. Yeah. I like Dave already. He says, I have a FreeNAS box, 3 2-terabyte drives, 6 gigabytes of RAM that I've kind of scrounged together. I only use it as an iSCSI target with the ZFS file system, of course, and nothing else. I use it for my disk-to-disk backup system, which is a command line duplicate script in Windows Server. Duplicati maybe. I'm running version 803, and it has been rock solid and very fast. I don't remember the exact throughput, but it's a significant portion of my gigabit Ethernet. My question is, do I need to keep that updated? I'm not really interested in any of the new features, but should I worry about security? It's only accessible internally. I worry about the remote possibility of an update could break it. So I think he's got a second question here, so maybe we should start with that. So what do you think, Alan?
So the first one, you probably should update, yes. There are a number of fixes and stuff in the newer FreeNAS. And also, if he's on 8.0.2, that's quite old. Like, he'll be using like ZFS version 13 instead of 5000.
What kind of upgrade path is that going to be? Is that going to be safe, you think?
Well, with ZFS, you basically export the pool and then import it and do an upgrade. It's fairly simple. Upgrading the FreeNAS config is a little more complicated. If he doesn't have any plugin jails, it's fairly straightforward. With plugin jails, because on the newer 911, the plugin jail system is different, so you have to kind of recreate the plugins a little bit. But it doesn't sound like he has any plugins. So I would highly recommend upgrading because there's known performance issues with the older ZFS where, when it gets close to being full, it just performs really, really poorly.
Yeah.
And there's just so many fixes that have gone into ZFS that you definitely want those.
Yeah, and from the FreeNAS side, the management UI is greatly improved, and there's some better stats on like how your box is doing, which can give you health trends. So you can kind of watch how,
like, all of a sudden it feels slow, and you can see a graph and be like, all of a sudden, the latency is much higher.
Yeah,
this one disk looks like it might be.
As his rig gets a little older, it sounds like it might be a little on the older side. As it gets a little older, it's good to have that info. So I'd say it's good from that point. Now, I just want to say, from like, if I was totally conservative paranoid, you probably don't have to update, but I would say it's
right, because
not a good idea.
it's offline or whatever, it's fine. But I would really, really, really say, just alone for the upgrade in ZFS, not to mention all the stuff you get from FreeNAS, but the upgrade in ZFS is important.
So he says, I'm trying to slowly convert the old infrastructure of my company over to BSD or Linux. I've got an Exchange 2003 server that only a couple of the execs from my old company use. I'm thinking of trying out Zimbra and some sort of spam assassin-like solution. I don't want to have to mess with spam rules all the time, so I'd like to find something that is relatively low maintenance. If you have any suggestions, let me know. I believe Exchange 2013 support, or 2003 support, is out in 2015, so I have until then. He says, is the free anti-spam any good in Untangle, or maybe ASSP or Scrollout F11 or F1? I'm really a Windows sysadmin by trade, so I'm going to test this all thoroughly before pulling the trigger.
I use Spam Assassin, and then basically I set up a cron tab that does SA-update, which downloads newer rules from Apache.
Oh, there you go.
And then SA-compile that compiles those to bytecode so they're faster to apply. And, when the latest trend of whatever they're trying to spam with comes out, I get the new rules the next day and my spam filter adapts. And then my spam filter also has auto-learning. It keeps track. It's like, oh, you've got 20 emails from this person in the past that weren't spam. So I'm not going to label this newest email that has a .zip attached to it and decide that that's spam, even though it's not. Right? So it has auto whitelist stuff that says, this person has a reputation for sending not spam email. So just because this one email has,
a high
some
rating.
really bad keyword that would make it really look like spam, it won't be. The biggest thing I like about Spam Assassin is that there's no one rule that will make something spam. Yes, it's all of these rules that each add up to the score, and then once the score is over a threshold, then it's marked as spam.
Okay.
On my server, it's actually, if the score is higher than this, then we reject the email and pretend that the mailbox doesn't even exist. And then if it's less, we say, it's temporary failure. Could you come back in a little bit? Because most spammers won't come back. And then so if they do come back, then we'll accept the mail.
Perfect.
And then, so anything below that threshold and above another threshold, just the subject line gets marked with start as spam, so that I can look at and decide or auto sort it. And then lastly, it just lets the rest of the email through.
I'll tell you, back in the day, I would have clients use Postini, but Google bought them and has killed it. Now, the company I'm actually talking to right now offline is MailRoute, because I think that MailRoute could be a really great alternative for folks who want a mail server but don't necessarily want to. Okay, so there's a couple nice things about having an external spam filter. Number one, if your internal mail server goes down, you can spool at that alternative spot. So all of your MX records go to them. They can spool for you. They do the filtering, and then they send it on to you. So MailRoute's one of those types of corporations where that's their whole gig is spam filtering, spooling, things like that, and then they forward it on to your server. Now, the other nice thing about that is then on your firewall and on your server, you can set it to only allow connections from the MailRoute server, which is a great way to reduce spam, because if you're only allowing incoming connections from one particular mail server on the internet, it is much harder for people to abuse your box. So there's a few nice things about MailRoute. They might become a sponsor down the road, but for right now, I would just recommend them just for that. You point your stuff at them, and then the only thing your mail server has to get is clean email. Now, the chat room is saying that Zimbra has actually got some pretty great spam filtering just built into it, which is something I'm going to be looking into pretty soon. So just maybe check out what Zimbra can do natively. Yeah. All right, next question comes from the subreddit. Alan, he says, is RAID dead? As you probably know or have experienced hands-on, the current RAID implementations like RAID 5 and RAID 6 have reached their limitations now that we have terabyte disks. A few terabyte disks in a RAID 5 can take days to rebuild. The result is that the RAID array performance and reliability is heavily degraded. RAID 6 is more reliable, although hardly 100%, but it's not exactly a good performer for writes, which is another reason why VDI does not work well.
I wouldn't say that RAID 6 writes any slower than RAID 5. But anyway.
So he's asking, is traditional RAID dead, Alan? What do you think?
Well, ZFS obviously has some advantages because it's the volume manager and the file system, whereas RAID is normally only the volume manager. It knows what data is actually live and what isn't. So when it does the resilver, the process of copying the data to the new disk that is replacing the failed one, it knows it can copy just the parts that are actually in use. It doesn't have to copy all the free space. So that shortens the resilver time a lot, especially depending on how full your array is. And it solves some other problems with RAID 5 and 6. And the other nice thing with RAID Z is that you can have higher levels of redundancy. You can have RAID Z 3, which means 3 redundant disks, which is also very good. And it can do things like RAID 50 and 60, where you are striping across 2 separate RAID arrays.
Yeah, I think it'd be crazy to say RAID's dead. I mean, that's cray-cray.
Right. LSI still makes nice cards and stuff, but it depends what your goal is. Like, if you're doing bulk storage, where you're going to have lots of terabyte disks, then yes, RAID 5 and 6 probably isn't the right solution anymore. But if you're doing more along the lines of, I need to hook up a giant RAID array of 300 gigabyte, 15,000 RPM disks, then it's still a legitimate solution. Some of those LSI cards now have flash-based caches on them and stuff, or they have smart cache where you can hook up an SSD and it basically is like a hardware version of the ZFS L2 ARC on an SSD. I'd still prefer to use ZFS, but that's just me. So I wouldn't say RAID is dead, but a lot of its use cases are being usurped by ZFS.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. All right. So next,
I guess there's a lot of places where ZFS is the better solution, but some people have to run Windows, and so their only choice is RAID, right?
So Stefan writes in, "Hey guys, thanks for the awesome show. I look forward to listening to TechSNAP every week. Might even be the highlight of some weeks. I have an odd question, but if you could answer, it'd be very helpful to my situation. This is a very odd question. I have an older TV. It's rear projection, about 47 inches. It's a beast. I have a few component inputs for this TV. The yellow, white, red, and green, blue.
So the yellow, white, and red ones, where all the video is over the yellow one, that's called composite.
Right.
And then component is the one where you have the red, green,
white, blue, or whatever. Yeah.
No, green, white is audio. It's green, blue, and
yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah.
Yes, yellow.
Yeah.
That are the three different colors.
Those are component.
And then the two audio. That's component.
Yeah. Ice says, so I've been planning on using an old PC running Ubuntu 12.04 to watch TV shows online. The problem is I have too many PCs and not enough keyboards and mice. Do either of you know of any add-ons for Firefox, or even preferably for Chrome, where I could browse on my laptop and project my session to another PC? I say I prefer Chrome simply because I would get the Flash updates for free. He's on Ubuntu. I know I could use VNC, but I never really liked using VNC, and I've always stopped all my personal projects that use VNC. Thanks for the awesome shows. I was wondering about, what's it called? Not Unity. What's it that allows you to move your mouse across?
Right, it's starts with an S.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
Synaptic?
No, you're close, though. Nope. You're really close.
Synergy.
Yep, Synergy.
Thank you, chat room.
Synergy. I think Synergy might be one solution for them.
Yep. What about, I know Firefox and Chrome both have things for syncing tabs between your phone and a computer.
Yeah.
Can you do it from one computer to another computer?
Well, or what about the Chromecast?
But I think even the one on, I don't know about the Chromecast, but the one on, he wants to use his Ubuntu computer, not Also, his thing doesn't have an HDMI port, so he can't plug a Chromecast into it.
It is a beast. I think probably Synergy is the way to go then. And then he just has one keyboard and mouse at the main rig. He's got the Ubuntu machine hooked up to the TV for display out, and then he just takes the mouse and he just drags it across. And Synergy works on Ubuntu, so there you go.
Yep.
All right.
But yes, I've seen Synergy used a lot for people that would to get dual monitors at work. They'll have their work desktop, and then they have their laptop sitting beside. And then with Synergy, they just use their work keyboard and mouse, and they could just mouse over onto the laptop and then back. And it's basically, keyboard and mouse are also letting them control their laptop instead of having to, have a docking station and a KVM switch or something.
I'm showing a picture to the video folks. Chase, my co-host on Unfilter, took a picture of my recording for Unfilter, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a fifth screen. And all in the recording room, and one's a Mac, one's an Ubuntu box, another one's a Mac, and then another Mac Hackintosh over here, and then an Ubuntu box over here. And he was trying to convince me just last night to grab Synergy, so that way I could just use one mouse and keyboard across all of them. And the nice thing is it does work cross-platform too. So I haven't tried it yet, but from what I was reading, you could have a Mac and a Linux box have their mice and keyboard linked that way. So I might try that there in my recording studio where we do Unfilter and some of the other shows. All right, so good luck, Stefan. Let us know how it goes. Next email comes in from Gary. He says, "Hello, Chris and Alan. Love the show. I'll be graduating in about a year, so I'm looking forward to starting my career. I'm a computer science major, and my main interest is in computer and network security. Due to an unfortunate scheduling conflict, I'm unable to take networking or computer security courses at my institution. I've been a Linux user since high school, and I have taught myself a decent amount of networking and computer security in my free time. My question is twofold, though. What can I do to help further my knowledge on the subject now that in order to prepare to enter the field upon graduation? Also, what kind of position is good to start in a computer and network security coming out of college, or as maybe a possible internship? I'm finding myself short on advice these days, so any help would be greatly appreciated. So, Alan, might be up your alley. You've worked at a university, college, whatever, higher education. What would you recommend to a student that kind of wants to? He's got a year left in school, kind of wants to start to prepare for when he graduates. Any thoughts?
He went to university. I went to college. It's hard to say, but yeah, like with mine, you had very little choice about your program, right? Like I had a program of study that said you take these classes, and I had at one point an option between taking a class on email server or wireless. A couple of, there was like two choices I could make in there.
I was thinking more like maybe he could get in with the IT at the university. Is that
I know at the college they had a lot of types of positions like that. They had like the in the open computer lab called Open Access, they would have a bunch of students whose job it was, help random people that are having trouble using the computer to do whatever. Separate from that, they also had work placements in the IT department, deploying switches and actually doing IT work.
Yeah.
They also had a program called Lab Rats, which was kind of a mix of a student employment thing and a tutoring thing. Basically, at certain times when the specialty computer labs would be open for students to work on their assignments or practice for tests or whatever, and the lab would be supervised by a student that was basically a tutor, and that student would get paid, and so those were also very good and good experience stuff. But I don't know specifically about his school if they have.
I would try to. I mean, if you can, I would try to angle to get in at the school's IT, just because a school network can actually be a fantastic place to learn because they're usually surprisingly complex, have unique security considerations, and people that are trying to break that security, and usually require you to come up with a lot of creative outside-the-box solutions.
Like, in a regular company, you don't have to assume that most of the people that work here are trying to break in.
Right.
Whereas when you have computer security classes happening on the school network, you have to assume that most of your users are actually hostile.
And also usually
they had huge amounts of data to back up, so they had these ridiculous backup systems. They had a giant deployment of VMware. They actually had a mixed environment on top of all the Windows for everything. They actually had to have some Unix servers for the programming classes and the Unix classes.
What about trolling like
so there was
Craigslist?
a shell server.
What do you think about going outside the school and trolling like Craigslist and putting like a
Craigslist is mostly full of scams.
You put up like a available for I don't know. Like I was thinking like I really think if you could, I would totally double down on helping out the university. Just write up a little mini resume and submit it to them.
Yeah. Well, usually they have postings for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially
even if they don't ask though, because what IT department doesn't need a hand with something? Like that there's no IT department that has like too many people sitting around. I'd love to see that one. So yeah, good luck with that, Gary, and hopefully it gets you ready for your first job. All right, Tyler writes in with a VPN question for us. Says, I love TechSNAP and all the JB shows. My question is in regards to increasing the speed of my VPN. Now get this. I currently have a PPTP server running on an Ubuntu server at my house. When I connect to the VPN using both Ubuntu and Windows, the speed fluctuates quite a bit, but are usually very low. I realize that my VPN download speeds cannot exceed the upload speed at my house. However, my upload speed is about 5 megabits, but I'm usually only able to get about 0.5 megabits when connected through my VPN. Could this be an issue with my config, or is it just a symptom of my home's upload speed?
A little bit of stuff. When you're bouncing off your home connection, you have to remember that your home connection has to download what you want from the website and then upload it back to you. So you have to be able to download it so fast and then turn around and upload it. So some of your upload speed will be used with, ACK packets and so on for the download, and anything else that's happening in your house. And also there's latency, right? The packets are slower because
they're being encrypted.
It takes longer. Well, yeah, not only are they being encrypted, but they're bouncing, instead of taking the shortest route from the site you're trying to go to you, It's taking the shortest route from the site, trying to go to your house, and then from your house to you.
I don't know about a 4.5 megabit overhead though.
Right, it's not that much overhead.
No,
but the latency can make a big difference.
Well,
there.
and 5 megabits is going to be ideal, right? That's going to be his ideal possible speed. And then also, if
Right.
anybody else at home is using the connection while he's using it, they're going to be detracting from that total speed.
I would definitely look at doing a speed test at home and then one through the VPN and see, and a couple of things like that.
Yeah.
Looking at the CPU utilization on the VPN server and seeing, is it high when you're downloading?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think running a couple speed tests would make a big difference there. Just to give you an idea of what's actually happening and so on.
The chat room really wants him to drop PPTP too.
Yes, you should probably look at something like OpenVPN probably. But the other one I would say is you might be running into bandwidth delay product, right? If your latency is really high, it can kill your bandwidth if you don't have your scaling window and everything tweaked just right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now,
I might play with that a bit this weekend. This weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving, so I'm going to be away.
Oh, wow. Do you guys eat turkey?
Yep. Yeah.
You don't have like the Pilgrims.
You can have a giant deep fried turkey.
Oh, yes. That's the way you do it. That is the way you do it. I did that last year.
See, no, we have the Pilgrims and stuff, but see, in Canada, it's harvest time now, not November. In November, there'll be snow on the ground.
That's why your stuff, you know what? That's why your stuff tastes better.
Why we have it early.
It tastes better because it's a little sweeter.
Because it's not old.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Because it's fresh.
And then you guys eat that and it makes you nice people. It's the circle of life.
Yeah, whereas you eat the rotten stuff. And
he was asking about maybe buying it. So I think this gets a little crazy when you want to go buy a VPS to set up a VPN, but he was wondering about going that route too.
Possibly, although if it's... A lot of people fall into the trap of, I'm going to put it in some foreign country so that I look like I'm coming from there. The problem with that is then the latency is even higher now.
Yeah.
Because you're going from you to the UK and then from the UK to wherever you're trying to go.
Well, we have that affiliate with ProXPN, and the thing that they do that I kind of like is you can pick and choose where you want the VPN to go to. So I think that's kind of neat. Right. Like, so depending on what you need, you could pick something more local.
Right. If you want more speed, pick something more local. If you want, to maybe watch something off iPlayer, then you make it look like you're in the UK and so on and so forth.
Right. And, he was talking about he was on a tight budget, and he's talking about getting a VPS, and I'm thinking, if you use the code JB Live, so ProXPN full rate is $625 a month, and if you use JB Live, they take 20% off for life. So you might just, Tyler, look at that, because that's going to give you the security and encryption you want. You get to pick and choose.
It's tuned, and you don't have to worry that the reason it's slow is because you didn't set something up right in the VPN server.
And they do PPTP and OpenVPN, and they also have an Android app, so you can have VPN on your Android, which is really nice.
Huh?
JB Live, 20% off. They're not a sponsor, but they should be. Yep. But they are an affiliate, so you can go over there and grab that. And I set up an account. I haven't played with them much yet because I just like the idea of, like, if I'm ever out and I need it, I got it. So you never know. All right, Aaron writes in, says, how fast are your pipes? Watching G-Potter download your podcast, and I watched Leo's and others. I know that yours is faster than 7 megabytes a second Comcast service that I have. I think you download faster than Revision 3 and Twit. So, Alan, what do we use for our downloads?
Each Scale Engine server is connected to the internet at a full gigabit. So that's up to 120 megabytes a second of upload. And then the CDN is distributing the load across a lot of those servers in a lot of different places so that you're just not getting bogged down.
Yeah. And thankfully, like, you don't limit it, right? So, like, I know, like, CacheFly...
There's no limits at all.
Yeah.
But yes, a lot of places, what they'll do is they'll say, each downloader can only have so much bandwidth.
Or whatever.
So that there's lots left over for other people. Where we're like, well, everybody go buck nutty. If a server gets to about 70% of its capacity, stop sending new users there and send them to the second closest server.
Did you say buck nutty? That's not a word.
Yes. It's better than cattywampus.
Well, okay. Pulling out the cattywampus reference. What about buck wild? I mean, isn't that the...
I don't know.
I like buck nutty. That's good.
And so that because I remember one of the biggest ones was bit.l. No, not bit. What was the service that used to do the CDN for
blip.tv?
Blip.tv, because they were selling Chris unlimited everything for $5 or whatever it was, or $8. Anyway, what
like
they would do is.
Yeah.
They would have a burst for like the first 10 seconds to get you enough to get the video started, and then they would limit it to barely more than the bitrate of the video.
Yep.
so that it would just be enough that, it would get started and then it would let you download just fast enough to keep playing without buffering.
Well, when you have a 2-hour TechSNAP, that is a long download. It is,
Exactly.
It's like an hour, 40 minutes.
And basically they're trying to smooth out those big spikes, whereas we're trying to,
get it done with as fast as possible.
Make the spike be as short as possible.
Yeah.
Because we pay for some of our bandwidth at 95th percentile, so it's better to burst really, really, really hard for a very small amount of time than to smooth it out.
Yeah. All right. So last email of the day.
But basically, in the end, we charge Chris based on the number of gigabytes. So the more gigabytes we can get out sooner, the better.
Yeah. And it is terabytes and terabytes and terabytes these days.
Huge numbers of terabytes.
Yeah. GV writes in. He says, Alan, excellent book pick. I really enjoyed the last show. I know you guys have loads of feedback, so I'll try to keep it short. I really liked Alan's book pick, 0 Day, which turned out to be a captivating read. The realism is spot on and gives the reader some good thinking about our increasing reliance on computer-managed automation and networking technologies and the security implications of it. It's excellent. Any other recommendations for read? Thanks, and keep up the work.
I just bought the sequel to that, which is called Trojan Horse, but I haven't read it yet. A previous one I did was Tom Clancy's Threat Vector. It has an aspect of the same type of thing.
Yeah.
The computer detail, it's purposely not as detailed because
He didn't want to be OCD about it. Yeah.
Well, no, he's like a Cold War author, not a computer guy.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know the stuff as well.
Yeah.
So he did, there's lots of nods to things like Active Directory, Windows Server, and just the way stuff would actually happen. So everything that's said is legitimate and real. It just doesn't go into as much detail as 0 Day does because he's not a domain expert, whereas Mark Rusinovich is. And so the detail isn't as high, but on the opposite coin, in Threat Vector, the running around and shooting people stuff is more realistic than it was in 0 Day, because that's Tom Clancy's baby.
Oh, interesting. That's also good, right?
Sadly, there won't be any more Tom Clancy novels.
Well, this is why I just recently went out and got a couple of his great movies, and I think this is maybe a good time to go out and get a couple of his great books, right? I mean, it seems like now, if ever, would be the time.
The newest one just came out right before he passed.
So Threat Vector, another Tom Clancy novel, and I'm sure that's on Audible, right? I should go check.
Yep, that's how I listened to it. I did the Amazon WhisperSync thing.
Yeah.
So I have the text and the Audible version.
Yeah, buddy.
When I bought the Kindle version, the Audible version was like $3 extra. It was a great deal because I think buying just the Audible version was like $40.
Yeah, I did already get this. I already have, so I will probably listen to this on audio.
You had started listening to it.
I did,
but then
on
you
your
got
recommendation.
distracted by something else, some political mumbo jumbo.
I did. You're right. I got a different. Yeah, that's right.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, like when you visited.
My trip to Asia last year.
Yeah,
because I finished that book on the way there, so on the way home I had to listen to a different book.
Yeah. All right, I'll toss these in the show notes though, because those are. I remember I started it and I was like, "Holy crap, this is really good."
Yeah, then you got distracted by political mumbo jumbo.
You know what it was? I remember now what it was. Is there was a book that came out on the history of the NSA.
Yes.
And I went and listened to that because it was really relevant to all the NSA leaks that happened. Now, before we run out of the feedback, I've just been signed. I'm sitting here editing the Google Docs, and I just got logged out, like in the middle of editing.
I watched you drop the Threat Vector link in and then logged out. That didn't make any sense.
I know. Freaking Google, man. Before we run, though, I just wanted to give a mention to VBSDCon that's coming up, right?
Yes, that's October 25th through 27th. So Friday there's a welcome dinner at 6, and then all day Saturday and Sunday are the conference. It's a hybrid unconference, so there's a mix of there's a couple of lecture-style things, but the rest of it is more unconference group collaboration stuff. I really like that style of conference. You get to meet a lot more people, talk about the things you want to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? It's great to go to these conferences like EuroBSDCon and sit and spend 45 minutes downloading as much data as you can into your brain about a subject from somebody. But at the same time, actually going out there and getting to, sit in a room with like the 10 other people that care about what you care about and just talk about it for half an hour is amazing. Or also the lightning talks. Spend 10 minutes on 10 different subjects and learn a little bit of everything so that, that night at the social event, you know what you want to talk about.
And the nice thing is, for some of us, is this one's going to be in the U.S. in Virginia. So.
Yes. So this is in Dulles, Virginia, which is just outside Washington, D.C. And it's they have a rate code with the hotel to cheaply stay at the hotel the conference is at, or they also have ones with like 2 other nearby hotels, and they're right by the airport, and there's a shuttle between the hotel and the airport, so nothing to worry about there.
That's so nice.
Yep.
And it's about 3 weeks away from tomorrow.
Yes.
So
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 25th. It's the 25th.
Yes. It's 2 weeks away from tomorrow.
Yep. So now's your last chance.
Really need to hurry up. Oh, and registration is only $75.
Oh, that's awesome.
A conference that's good normally costs at least $300, more like $750.
Yeah.
And it's only $75.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that includes the dinner.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, there's a big party on Saturday.
Oh, they're gonna. Oh man, gosh, I just need to be able to go to all this stuff. I gotta get an intern that can sit here and do these shows, and I can go travel around and go to all these things. That'd be great. Totally enjoy that, and get down there and eat some big old barbecue. And maybe someday when the Jupiter Broadcasting Empire can support my traveling adventures.
Yep.
All right, Alan, well, I want to let people know they can email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or pop that contact link at the top of our show page, anywhere really on the site, or start a link in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And some of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, I snuck this one at the top of the Roundup because it's a total TechSNAP told you so story. You've been saying this forever, since we started this show. Ad networks can be abused. Now we have a story of how the NSA tracks Tor users by buying Google ads, setting a cookie via that Google ad on their computer, and using that to quote-unquote stain the user so then they can follow where they go on Tor when they hit a Tor site that has ads, and when they come off Tor and they go to a site that has ads and they're not being routed through Tor anymore.
If the user isn't smart enough to use a separate browser for their
like the Tor bundle, they can still get your Tor bundle though.
Right. Well, they can track your Tor bundle, but if you're only doing it ever on Tor, then they're only getting limited amount of data.
They can still use that a bit to kind of figure out who you are, though. That's kind of
by looking at the different places you go and if you log into anything. Yes.
So it says here, this is, of course, based on some leaks from Edward Snowden published by The Guardian. The system that the NSA uses to locate and identify Tor users begins, at least sometimes, with buying ads on networks like Google AdSense. The article goes on to say, just because you're using Tor doesn't mean that your browser isn't storing cookies.
Yes. So you need to be using private browsing mode and definitely completely separating your Tor session from your regular browsing session.
And maybe use no script and ad block.
Yeah.
While you're at it. But don't use ad block on our website, please. Not that we really have many.
Not that you need to go to our website using Tor.
No. You know what I always feel like talking about? Internet Explorer 0 days. What we got here, Alan?
There's just an interesting story. 2-for-1 sale at Microsoft today. There's been this Internet Explorer 0 day going on for a couple days, and it was actively being exploited. And Microsoft warned about it, and they're like, the patch will come out on Tuesday, and it did. And then there was also a second patch for a different IE 0 day, which they hadn't warned people about.
Oh, jeez.
That was actively being exploited in Japan and Korea.
Huh. Go patch people. And quit using Internet Explorer, too. Do us a solid on that.
Yeah. Just throw the Internet Explorer under the bus.
Coders scramble to create the next black hole after...
the author of the Black Hole Exploit Kit was arrested, and so people who write the other exploit kits are vying for that market.
They want that position.
Black Hole was like huge money, as it was basically it just became the one to get, and so lots of places that didn't know that much better would just go at it. Security
researchers have called black hole one of the internet's most prevalent threats. Over the past few years, RCA Security Division of EMC estimates 75 to 80% of all web threats over the past 2 years are linked to black hole.
Right, and so the author of that has been arrested, and so the other exploit kits are at the same time trying to steal that market share and not get caught.
Well, remember, kids, it's only legal when you sell it to the NSA.
Sometimes it pays to be the third biggest.
No kidding, right? Here's one for you. Save lots of disk space with Microsoft's new Windows Update Cleanup tool. This doesn't sound good.
So this is a plugin for the Windows disk cleanup tool.
Yeah.
That will go through that WinSXS directory and get rid of files that are superseded. So I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, but your Windows 7 install will just grow and grow. And mostly it's when you install a Windows Update, it backs up the old file in case you want to uninstall that update.
Yeah.
After a certain amount of time, you really don't need that anymore. Apparently, the average user can save between 2 and 4 or more gigabytes by cleaning up.
Boy, if you're on an SSD, that's nothing to sneeze
I'm running an SSD with a partition that's only 32 gigs for the Windows install.
That hurts.
So I have very little. So saving 4 gigs would more than double my free space on this drive, and I'm looking very much forward to running this tool. So when I saw that, I was like, gotta show that, because like my Windows directory is like 20 gigs. Yeah. Like, what does it need 20 gigs for?
No. And I mean, I love the idea that you can uninstall, but after like a year, you're not going back.
Yeah, exactly. And when they finally do a service pack, there's a way to uninstall all the stuff, but they don't do service packs very often anymore. So.
Well, I'm loving that Bruce Schneier's writing for The Guardian. He just has an article up that says why the NSA attacks on the internet must be made public. He says by reporting on the agency's actions, the vulnerabilities in our computer systems can be fixed. It's the only way to force change. That's a great point. Something we all know, but I feel like we have an advocate that's in now the mainstream media and some of this kind of stuff, which is huge in a way.
And he joined the Electronic Frontier Foundation as well over all this stuff, I think.
This has really kind of shooken him up, hasn't it?
Yep.
It seems to have. Yeah.
Well, he got access to the raw data, but some of it is so bad that they don't want to tell us about it.
Yeah. So did you hear about Google's new vulnerability rewards that they're rolling out?
Yes, I just added it to the round.
I know.
But yes. So originally Google was considering just extending their bug bounty program to cover open source projects as well. But they're like, we've noticed with our bug bounty program, the problem is that we get sent a lot of things that aren't really bugs. People just trying to spam everything that they can think of to try to get money out of us. So especially on an open source project where the developers only have so much time, flooding them with emails about things that aren't really bugs is probably just going to hurt the project rather than help it.
Yeah.
So rather than that, we're going to offer those people money. Basically, they have a system where they're going to say, if you're going to make infrastructural, architectural improvements to infrastructure programs, so adding address space layout randomization support to such and such a big important program, or going through and auditing and fixing these little nits in this program and that program.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So they're going to offer basically bounties for implementing new security features and improvements to infrastructure programs, including OpenSSH, Bind, and the DHCP server, image processing stuff like libjpeg, libjpeg turbo, PNG and GIF, and so on. Stuff Google uses like Chromium and Blink.
OpenSSL.
Big libraries like OpenSSL and zlib, both of which have been exploited extensively in the past. And security critical commonly used components of the Linux kernel, including KVM.
That's awesome.
Hopefully they'll extend that to FreeBSD as well, actually.
And it's funny because I saw people being snarky about this, being, it's not enough money, but this is cool.
Well,
it's like you can get anywhere between 500 to 3,000.
500 to 31,337, which is an awesome number, right? But, there's a reason why the TechSNAP t-shirt costs $13.37.
It's an awesome number.
Yeah. But, it's work that needs to be done anyway, and hopefully people were going to do it anyway, and, why not get the thing from Google, right?
Yeah. Good for Google.
And they're also planning to extend the program in the future to include web servers, Apache, Lady, and Nginx, mail servers, including SendMail, Postfix, and XM, toolchain things like JCC and BitUtils and LLVM, which would be interesting. Hopefully, FreeBSD can capitalize on the LLVM Clang stuff. And even things like OpenVPN. So I think this is a good way to do it because, just doing bug bounties for open source would likely, like Google says, just overwhelm the projects with spurious bug reports.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is saying, hey, people actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Here's a little reward for doing stuff like using a more secure allocator, adding privilege separation, cleaning up sketchy calls to stircat, or enabling ASLR.
Very good, Google. Thank you, Google. I like that it's just all kinds of improvements. All right,
Yep.
now we got one in here about email delivery and what pen testers should know. That's up my
So
alley.
it's basically, if you're doing penetration testing, we've kind of talked about before how white hat phishing, right? Sending phishing email to the place you're trying to pen test and seeing if they fall for it. Well, if you want your phishing emails to get through, you need to use the same techniques that spammers do to make sure it gets through. And a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah. And there's some good examples in the article. Check out. Okay, Alan, everything you know about cryptography in an hour.
Everything you need to know.
Yeah.
So this tweet came up just, I think, yesterday. It was the FOSS LC, the company that records all the talks from BSDCan, said that they did a little looking around and they found that the most popular video ever was one from 2010 where Colin Percival, who used to be the FreeBSD security officer, it's a bit of a friend of mine, actually. We had the same flight home from Malta, and we talked quite a bit. He did a presentation at BSDCan, which is everything you need to know about cryptography in 1 hour. And so it's only an hour long, actually a little bit less, I think. And it covers all the basics of cryptography. It's a great starter. I haven't managed to get through the whole thing yet, but I really want to.
Well, awesome. We'll have a link to it in the roundup if you guys want to watch that. That's a great example of where the roundup is like a little extended reading when you get done with the show, folks.
Yeah, it's like, I could have made an entire episode out of that talk, but instead you can just go watch it yourself.
Yeah. Now, this next one got a little play in our subreddit this week. Whatever happened to due process, damn it?
Yep. So this is EasyDNS, which is one of the big DNS providers, and they happen to be based in Canada. And they got a letter from the police in England demanding that this one website not only be taken down, but have it redirected to their website.
Oh, what?
Yeah. With no due process, no court, anything. It was just a letter from the police saying, will you please take this website down and redirect the traffic to this page saying these things?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently the page was taking out like a file sharing website. But the really insidious thing is the page that it landed on directed users to go to these different services in the UK to pay for the content. So it kind of seems to be this thing where, the media companies are bribing the police to selectively enforce this anti-piracy stuff and going so far as to send the traffic that used to go to the pirate site to the sites that are selling the content. It's really, really slimy looking.
Yeah. It just sounds slimy.
Yes. And, and I think in this case, the website in question was hosted in Singapore and possibly wasn't legal in Singapore. And so with the DNS provider being in Canada and the police being in the UK,
Yeah.
And the site being in Singapore, where does the authority extend and how does that work?
That is complicated, isn't it?
And the worst part was that the police in London threatened to escalate it to ICANN and have EasyDNS's accreditation as a domain registrar pulled.
Whoa! That would hurt.
Now, I don't know if ICANN would have done that, but to EasyDNS, that was a large risk that they weren't that willing to take. They would like to fight it, but, that if their accreditation got pulled, that would kill their entire business.
Mm-hmm. Certainly would. That'd be a shame. All right.
Yeah.
Just a couple more we're going to get through here. WAT. What is WAT? Or WAT?
Yes. WAT. Exactly.
WAT.
This is a lightning talk from a website called Destroy All Software.
Oh, wow.
I got linked this the other day, and I think it's only 10 or 15 minutes, but it's the most hilarious thing ever. Especially if you've ever done any programming in like Ruby or JavaScript. And so it just goes through it. It's like all these unexpected things that are that happen when you try to do. It's like, what happens when you try to add an array and a hash together, or what happens if you try to, in JavaScript you do this and that, and it puts out nan, or not a number, when you try to do mathematic operations on a number, right? So if you make an empty array of 16 elements, it prints 16 commas, right? Because the comma was the separator of, and then nothing was the different elements, right? And then so if you make an array and tell it to repeat WAT 16 times, then you get WAT, right? Now, if you try to add 1 to that, what do you get?
What do you get?
Right? Because all of a sudden you have a string and you're trying to add a number to it. sorry, if you do WAT plus 1, it treats that as a concatenation, and you get WAT 1
Yeah.
16 times. What happens if you do WAT minus 1 plus Batman? You get Batman. It's a really good demo of what lightning talks are like, right? And this one is just really, really funny and
Very
short.
funny,
And
yeah.
it's like, I wish the talks I gave at these conferences were this funny.
It's a good one to watch. The chat room
it's a
likes it
great
too.
one. You really should watch it. And I think there's a bunch of other ones like it. I haven't had time to dig through this site. It's the first time I've ever heard of destroyallsoftware.com.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great site for programmers.
So now we are in the final stretch here, the last 2 roundup stories. So let's talk about the Game Over Trojan utilizing SSL. Alan, what do you think?
Yep. I'm surprised that hasn't happened more.
Right.
Basically, instead of having all the command and control just be over regular HTTP.
Yeah.
Part of it was that a lot of times the command and control and stuff was all done over HTTP because it would use compromised web servers, and you can't guarantee that compromised web server is going to have an SSL certificate.
Good point.
SSL certificates are pretty cheap at GoDaddy. You can go buy a bunch.
Yeah, don't use them for this, though.
Yeah.
But I have wondered, like, almost every time we talk about these kinds of things on the show, it's clear
basically,
text.
the security researchers are able to get in there and learn the command and control protocol and sometimes even take over part of the botnet. So if it's all encrypted, then it's harder to do that.
All right, one last story in the roundup.
Yes. The other thing is bulletproof hosting. Basically, these are hosting companies that purposely host people that are sending spam, the websites that are getting spammed, or botnets and controllers and all the the stuff that the hackers are using. And so what a bulletproof host does is says that we'll just ignore all the threatening letters. Right? But in this case, Centrex, the one that was used to host a lot of the forums that sell things like the Black Hole Exploit Kit, has gone out of business. Filed for bankruptcy protection. Apparently, they're having some trouble with uptime. And, it just goes to show you that just because they claim it's bulletproof doesn't mean it's actually bulletproof. In fact, oftentimes it's not.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of I've never really given much thought to this. I'm looking at they have in the link that you've provided, they have like a PDF embedded here from the High Court of Justice, where they are one of these letters they send.
This one's no, that's the letter of filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
I'm
not
reading it
like
right
a takedown.
That's crazy, Alan. That's crazy. And that's on Curb Security. There's a couple articles now on Curb Security.
Yep. Well, I think it's partly related to the same thing. But, he's working very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alan. Well, speaking of working very hard, we're all done working very hard. That brings us to the end of this week's broadcast, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So very good. Now, TechSNAP is live, like we mentioned earlier in the show, on Thursdays. You go over to jblive.tv, and you can join us at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
That's right. And jblive.info for the audio edition. And we also want your email, so just hit that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website because we love answering your questions. We also would love to get you to participate in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. You can vote on stories, start discussion threads. We go in there from time to time, troll what you guys are talking about, see what you think is important, and that helps influence the direction of our content, and we always appreciate that. Okay, Alan. Also, I want to make special mention. We have torrent feeds available. I try to mention those every episode, but I usually forget. So this week I wanted to make sure I mention, if you want to help us defer any bandwidth, you can go over to the show notes and click on the torrent feed. We have one where you can just put it in any RSS reader. Like, I don't know a ton of them, but I know that uTorrent and Miro and a lot support podcast downloads via torrent. So if you have one of those, just pop the feed in there, and then it'll automatically download it. Or you can just download the one off torrent if you like as well. Well, very good, Alan. Thank you very much, sir. Have a great week. We'll see you next week, okay?
Yep.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.